The Indiana Fever walked away with a big win, but by the time the final buzzer faded into the background, the conversation had already shifted somewhere completely different. It wasn't about the final score. It wasn't even about who was missing from the lineup. Instead, one brief post-game message from head coach Stephanie White quickly became the center of attention, and fans wasted no time trying to decode what they had just heard. As White praised her team's effort, she highlighted their ball security, pointing out that they finished the game with only 7 turnovers. On the surface, it sounded like a coach celebrating disciplined basketball after an important victory. But across social media, many fans heard something else entirely. Some believed the comment carried an indirect message aimed at Caitlin Clark, who missed the game and whose aggressive playmaking style naturally leads to more turnovers than most players. Others insisted the reaction was being blown out of proportion and that White was simply recognizing a strong team performance. Within minutes, the focus had moved away from the win itself. The real story had become the meaning behind a single comment, and that's where the debate truly began. As the discussion grew louder, many fans pointed out that the game itself came with important context that couldn't be ignored. The Fever earned an impressive victory, but they did so without Caitlin Clark on the floor, while the Aces were also missing their biggest star, Aya Wilson. Those two absences immediately became part of the conversation because they changed how people viewed the result. Supporters of Indiana saw a resilient team proving it could respond under difficult circumstances. Others argued that Las Vegas wasn't at full strength either, making it difficult to draw major conclusions from a single game. That difference in perspective only fueled the debate further. Instead of celebrating the win on its own, fans began comparing what the Fever looked like without Clark and whether the cleaner style of play meant anything at all. Every rebound, every possession, and especially the low turnover total became talking points. For some, it was evidence that the team had adjusted well for one night. For others, it was unfair to compare one game without Clark to everything she brings over the course of a season. Suddenly, the victory itself wasn't the headline anymore. The circumstances surrounding it had become just as important as the final score, setting the stage for even more passionate reactions. This is the moment that sent the conversation in a completely different direction. During her post-game remarks, Stephanie White praised several areas that she believed made the difference. She highlighted the team's 7 turnovers, their advantage on the boards, and the way the defense settled in after a strong first quarter from Las Vegas. From a coaching standpoint, those are the kinds of details that often appear in every post-game speech. Coaches regularly emphasize ball security, rebounding, and defensive effort because those are the fundamentals that help win games. But this time, many fans didn't hear those comments in isolation. Because Caitlin Clark wasn't playing, some immediately connected White's emphasis on limiting turnovers to Clark's high-risk, high-reward style as a primary ball handler. That interpretation spread quickly online, with supporters arguing the coach was subtly contrasting the team's performance without ever mentioning Clark by name. Others pushed back just as strongly, saying it was unfair to turn a routine locker room speech into a personal statement about one player. To them, White was simply recognizing what her team had done well on that particular night. The words themselves weren't especially controversial. It was the timing, the circumstances, and the existing debate surrounding Clark that transformed an ordinary coaching message into one of the most discussed moments after the game. Once clips of Stephanie White's post-game remarks began circulating online, the reactions split almost instantly. Caitlin Clark supporters argued that the emphasis on ball security felt like an unnecessary comparison, especially with Clark unavailable to play. Many pointed out that elite playmakers often accept a higher number of turnovers because they're constantly creating scoring opportunities that few others even attempt. From that perspective, celebrating the low turnover total sounded, to some, like an indirect critique of Clark's style. On the other side, plenty of Fever fans defended White, saying coaches routinely highlight the areas that lead to victories and that there was no reason to read beyond the actual words she spoke. Neutral observers landed somewhere in the middle, acknowledging that while the comments themselves were fairly standard, the current spotlight on Indiana means almost every statement is analyzed through the lens of Clark's impact. That contrast became the real story. One group heard praise for a disciplined team performance, while another heard a subtle message about the team's identity without its biggest star. The words never changed, but the interpretations did, and that difference is exactly why the discussion continued long after the game had ended. As the debate continued, one statistic kept resurfacing more than any other: turnovers. For many fans, that number became the centerpiece of the entire conversation. On one side were those who viewed fewer turnovers as proof that the Fever played a more controlled and disciplined game. On the other were supporters who argued that judging Caitlin Clark by that single category ignores the nature of her role. Elite playmakers are often asked to make the most difficult passes on the floor, pushing the pace and creating opportunities that others might never attempt. That aggressive style can naturally lead to more mistakes, but it also creates assists, open shots, and offensive rhythm that don't always show up in a simple turnover comparison. That's why Clark's style continues to divide opinion whenever Indiana wins without her. Some fans see cleaner basketball without the risks, while others believe the team's long-term ceiling is much higher with her creativity leading the offense, even if it comes with occasional errors. The discussion has become less about one box score statistic and more about two very different philosophies of winning. One values caution and consistency, while the other embraces calculated risk in pursuit of a more explosive offense. By the end of the night, it was clear the conversation had grown far beyond a single regular season win. Every game involving the Fever now seems to carry extra meaning because expectations surrounding Caitlin Clark, Stephanie White, and the organization continue to rise. When Clark plays, every possession is analyzed, every turnover is debated, and every coaching decision is placed under a microscope. When she doesn't play, the comparisons begin almost immediately. That's the reality of having one of the league's biggest stars on your roster. Even routine post-game comments can become headline material if fans believe they reveal something about the team's direction or identity. At the same time, White faces the challenge of balancing praise for the players available while avoiding remarks that can be interpreted in multiple ways. Whether those interpretations are fair or not, they have become part of the Fever's weekly storyline. The pressure isn't just about winning games anymore. It's about managing expectations, navigating constant scrutiny, and understanding that nearly every performance, good or bad, will be viewed through the lens of Caitlin Clark's influence on the team. What started as a routine post-game speech has now become part of a much larger conversation that doesn't appear to be fading anytime soon. The debate is no longer centered on one victory or even one comment from Stephanie White. Instead, it's about how every future game, every coaching decision, and every public statement involving the Indiana Fever will likely be examined through the lens of Caitlin Clark's impact. As long as Clark remains one of the most talked about players in basketball, even ordinary moments have the potential to spark extraordinary reactions. Some fans will continue seeing hidden meaning in every remark, while others will argue that people are reading far too much into standard coaching language. That divide has become part of the Fever's story, creating discussions that extend well beyond the final buzzer. Whether the next headline comes after a win, a loss, or another post-game interview, the spotlight isn't getting any smaller. If anything, this latest debate shows that the conversation surrounding Caitlin Clark and the Fever is still evolving, with no clear ending in sight. That's it for today's update. Thanks for watching today's news exclusive. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more breaking sports news. See you in the next one.